Fuel. We need fuel to survive, whether it's through starting a fire to cook or powering an electronic device. Our society needs fuel to thrive. Post-industrial revolution, we have needed fuel to operate much of our society. So where does our fuel come from? There are 4 different types of fuel categories. Renewable, which are energy sources that are naturally replenished over a short time span and can be used sustainably without being depleted. There are non-renewable, which are energy sources that are limited in supply and cannot be naturally replaced within a human relevant time frame once they're consumed. There are finite, and finite energy sources are natural sources with a limited supply and will eventually run out over time. And then there is infinite, which are energy sources that are natural resources that are considered limitless and will never run out, making them available for use indefinitely. And all energy types will fit into this table. And so I'll make a table. So I've just made this table just as a visual. All energy sources will fit in this table. Now some people can argue, aren't all renewable resources infinite? Isn't that contradictory? Well, not exactly. Resources can be renewable, but not finite if they are harvested unsustainably. The first example I will introduce is biomass. I'm going to use tables to signify that. Biomass is energy derived from organic materials like wood, agriculture, residues, and waste. Actually, wood would be another. Wood. Put on top. Yeah, so this symbolizes biomass. They're not infinite if we don't manage the regenerative systems well. For example, there's a limited amount of wood and trees. If we cut all those trees down, which is also called deforestation, and don't plant the saplings back, we will reach a point where wood will be a limited or finite resource even with its regenerative nature. Another field in this category is water-based energy sources such as hydropower, tidal energy, and wave energy. And unlike Minecraft, where we can get infinite water, our water cycle IRL is more of a closed system. So there's only so much water that the earth contains, and that can be generated to electricity. For example, we can't generate more water for more electricity than the set amount of water, set volume of water we have in our existing water cycle. There are also external factors that set a finite availability and the capacity to generate energy, such as, geography, where only certain coasts and rivers with these set of factors are able to generate energy. Before we move on, I mentioned closed systems, so let's just speed run what that is. TLDR, matter in, energy out. Limited matter in, definitely no matter out. Got it? The last category in this, renewable but finite resource is geothermal energy, which I'll use lava to, depict it. Geothermal is finite due to, the practical limitations such as the extraction rate, replenishment rate, and the geography, etc. Aside from this, it can also be considered, infinite because, to an extent, the heat coming from the Earth's core just won't, quote unquote, run out. Infinite renewable resources are sources that don't run out or have a system boundary. This will be, for example, geothermal, like we said earlier, but also, solar and wind energy. Although some will argue that it's still a finite resource as it is a star and will die off one day. And wind is also considered finite due to practical limitations, where some days are not windy and some days are. These can be attributed to, the increased weather fluctuations attributed to climate change and urban development, where if they're more taller buildings and infrastructures, wind is slightly less, accessible. The last category or group would be non-renewable and finite. These resources, I think we are familiar with it. Fossil fuel is an umbrella term for this category, which includes what the world mostly runs on: coal, gas, and oil. Which, how do you depict oil in Minecraft? I'm going to use the sign again. Oil. Fossil fuels requires digging and extraction from the Earth's crust. Now, nuclear is an interesting one. The uranium needed for nuclear fission is a non-renewable and finite resource, but it uses so little that some people, usually, investors, won't see it as a fossil fuel. Nuclear fission is basically like the splitting of atoms, which releases energy. Nuclear emits water vapor, which is technically better than, greenhouse gases, but we will still run out of uranium at some point. Though maybe some good news, some of these finite resources can be considered as renewable and maybe even infinite if managed sustainably. Stuff like biomass or biofuel or water-based energy or like a combustion of waste from incineration can be managed to be an infinite and renewable resource. So what does this all mean? As you're probably aware, we are heavily reliant on the sources that are, non-renewable and finite. And almost all renewable resources can easily fall under the finite category if they're not managed sustainably. This means that we're quickly exhausting our finite resources, fossil fuels and nuclear, for example, and the swap to, renewable resources has proved not to be an easy task. This honestly terrifies me a little, especially with how much more energy we need with our population growing, let alone politics. And also the environmental impacts that comes with fossil fuels: pollution, gas flares, oil spills, and increased greenhouse gases, climate change, the list goes on. Now we're all wondering, can we just swap to these renewable energy resources tomorrow? Can we? I wish it was that easy. There are certain factors that prevent policymakers from phasing out fossil fuel quicker than they, actually are. The first one is money. You're useless. Many of the richest economies in the world, namely the Middle East, rely on exporting fossil fuels. To phase out fossil fuels quickly is like ripping the floor underneath them, or the mountain of money underneath them. Another wealth-related factor is that poorer and developing countries don't have the necessary infrastructure to swap to these renewable resources efficiently in a short period of time. This ties with the environmental Kuznets curve, which theorizes a tipping point where the development goes from, unsustainable and then to sustainable. There are a lot of opinions around the environmental Kuznets curve, and honestly, it deserves another video. Though I will say that developing countries emit way less than developed countries, and they will benefit from a more sustainable energy source from both environmental and developmental standpoints. There are also physical limitations. As I mentioned earlier, geography and our deteriorating environment are just a few factors that limit the availability of renewable resources, hence affecting the speed of renewable energy adaptation. We can't just magically snap efficient energy infrastructure overnight. We're not Thanos. I wish we could though. Thanos was right all along. So what can we do though? I don't want to sound like a broken record echoing what everyone has already said. I mean, who am I even preaching this to? Heck, you guys are probably even more intelligent than I am. But you know me, I'm sappy. So I will say this, use that intelligence for something. I won't tell you what to do, you already know what you need to do. And let this be your biannual Minecraft encouragement to take a step towards something bigger. No matter how ridiculous the odds may seem, within us resides the power to overcome these challenges and achieve something beautiful, that one day we'll look back at where we started and be amazed by how far we've come. A legend, Technoblade. To be honest, I wrote the script last year, August 2023 and it's now September 2024, the day of recording. And yeah, since then I've had a slightly different perspective, mostly on transitioning to renewable energy, especially with how solar panels are being mass produced right now, and transitioning to renewable energy doesn't seem that difficult anymore. Just missed that jump. I've heard that many oil countries in the Middle East are starting to worry about their oil reserves. And maybe I'm just being optimistic, but I also truly believe that renewable energy has never been, this accessible. And it's not really a matter of access anymore, but a matter of politics. And this makes it an entirely different issue. As long as we're divided, there's not going to be much consensus to implement stuff like renewable energy. But yeah, those are just my thoughts at the moment. And yeah, like and subscribe if you find this stuff interesting and really helps me out. Bye.